Hey everyone, welcome to our presentation on HydraFiber A to Z. My name is Jennifer Neujahr. I'm the Director of Horticulture for the Profile Products Group. Joining me is Daniel Norden, our R&D Manager and Senior Technical Specialist, and we want to tell you a little bit more today about HydraFiber. We're going to take you from A to Z. So to get started, I just wanted to let you know that we'll be covering a variety of topics today. We'll tell you a little bit about Profile Products, the company that makes HydraFiber. We'll explain in further detail regarding HydraFiber, how we make it, and what makes it so special and unique. We'll talk a little bit about some of the specialized equipment you need for some of our HydraFiber products, and then lastly, we'll show you some results from the field. So without further ado, we'll get started. Welcome to Conover, North Carolina. This is our headquarters for Profile as it relates to manufacturing. It's our largest wood refining plant. Profile Products' main business is erosion control and making sports field supplements. And recently, we've entered the horticulture market. The company has been in existence for a long period of time and are experts in the area of wood refining. And what you're looking here is a picture of our plant in Conover, North Carolina, just outside of Charlotte. The process is relatively simple. We basically take southern yellow pine chips, which are brought to us by lumber mills and chip mills in the area. These chips are conveyed onto our chip yard with a series of conveyors, and then the chips are fed into the back of our factory into one of our two digesting units. We use heat, pressure, and steam to basically cook the chips and melt them enough that they become pliable, and then we use a set of refining plates that are circular in fashion to rub the fibers apart. When we rub them apart, we're able to get these fluffy fibers, which you see on the lower right-hand corner of the screen. And those fibers are very light and fluffy. And so in an effort to be able to ship these all over the world very cost-effectively, we compress them into 50-pound bales. These bales will expand 13 times, and because the bales are so highly compressed, they need a specialized piece of equipment, which we'll talk about later in our presentation, to uncompress, fluff, and blend them properly. These 50-pound bales is really where we started with our product 5 years ago when the market was asking us for some alternatives to other raw materials that were tended to be used in soil and media programs. Because there's been such an overwhelming request for our product and to receive it in new product forms, this year we're also introducing our product Ultra, as well as a product formulation called Easy Blend in cubic, in tower formulations and in tower format. So this provides our customers yet another option and another way to be using our product. And the nice thing about the towers is they can be pad mixed or bucket blended. There are a lot of things that make our process very different. There are a lot of different ways also that you can work with wood, refine wood. The neat thing about our process is we're able to make a product that's completely sterile and inert and suitable for organic production. We're also able to make a very thin fiber that has a lot of surface area, and that surface area translates itself back into a place that can hold lots of different water droplet particles. And as such, many of our customers tell us that they notice that when it comes to working with blends that have HydraFiber, water is just managed very differently in soil blends that contain HydraFiber. The picture on the left shows one method for wood refining. The picture on the right shows thermally refined wood fiber, which is how we make our wood fiber. When the product is completely made, it's, as I mentioned, sterile and inert because of the process that we follow. And all of our products use the same tree species, southern yellow pine. But one of the main differences, and we're going to go through the products in further detail here in a second, is really just the compression ratio. So our HydraFiber Ultra bales, the 50-pound bales, they require a specialized piece of equipment because they're so highly compressed. However, the advantage of them, as you can see in this graphic on the top row, is that because they're so highly compressed, they also yield the most per truck. So one truckload of HydraFiber 50-pound Ultra bales will basically replace 5 truckloads of peat or around 8 truckloads of perlite. Now, our new towers that are available in Ultra and Easy Blend, as you can see in the second and third lines, are also compressed, just not as compressed as much. You have Ultra towers, which are what I would call kind of middle of the road compressed, so you get some efficiency as it relates to shipping, storage, and the Easy Blend are our least compressed product, hence the name Easy. It's fairly easy to break Easy Blend apart with just a front end loader or a simple device to pull the bale apart, the tower apart. As I mentioned before, all of our products are made in our factory in North Carolina, just outside of Charlotte. We use only southern yellow pine for our product. Because we have extensive experience in wood and working with wood because of our erosion control business, you saw in our chipyard lots of different types of wood species. For the horticulture business, all of the academics have done their work on southern yellow pine, and they've really classified that as one of the safest species for doing plant growth in, and so that's why we continue to only use southern yellow pine in our horticulture products. Our product is 100% renewable. It's also suitable for organic use because we are able to heat our fibers to a very high temperature. We're able to basically make the product sterile and inert, which makes it very safe as a soil and media component, especially in crops that require a fair bit of food safety expertise. I'm showing the chemical characteristics for our 50-pound Ultra bale. However, these characteristics are also similar for our Ultra towers. The pH is around 4.5 in our materials, and our moisture content is around 20%. And Daniel Norden will explain in a little bit some of the things you need to know as it relates to making the transition to HydraFiber, and he'll explain at that time, you know, why we choose to send our materials out at the moisture content that we do. Our product is available in 5 different grades, and those grades are basically diameter measurements. Depending on what you're growing and where you're growing, the climate you're growing in, that really is what dictates the grade that you'll choose for your crops. I'm going to turn it over to Daniel Norden here. He's going to explain to you the main differences regarding our grades and give you some guidelines as to how to choose which grade might be the right one for your operation.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So Jennifer mentioned earlier that you know, we have a double disc refining system, and we can create these different grades based on how close or far apart these two plates are from one another. And so when our plates are very close together, we can make very fine fibers like 065, 090. When they're farther apart, then we make the coarser grades like 365 or 510. So looking at this chart is the physical properties, and as Jennifer mentioned, you know, depending on where you're located or depending on what type of crop you're growing, you will help dictate which grade you'll want to go with. So for example, if you want a lot of water retention, then you would want to go with the 065. If you're looking for a lot of airspace, then you don't want to go with the 510. Our most popular grind is the 160. It has the best balance of water to airspace of the 5 grades, and it's what most growers who are moving from a peat perlite mix to a peat HydraFiber mix tend to go with, at least initially. Whereas, you know, like many of our customers in California, they like the 065 grind because they tend to be in more arid, dry environments, and so they want to maximize their water retention. The other strategy that many of our growers look to is, you know, what's their crop cycle. So all 5 grinds that we offer to the marketplace, they're all rated for at least 12 months in the container. So they're going to provide more than enough longevity for most of the color ornamentals that most of our customers are growing. However, you know, if you're growing longer term crops like perennials, you know, for example, you'd want to use most likely the 160 or coarser. For trees and shrubs that are going to be longer crop cycles, the 510 would be rated for over 3.5 years in the container.
Cool, thanks for that, Daniel. And as I mentioned before, you know, one of the big introductions this year is, of course, having the product available in a tower formulation, which is providing it in a format that's not as highly compressed as our 50-pound bales, but it lends itself to folks that are pad mixing or bucket blending. We are working on recommendations for how to mix these towers in inline formation and hope to provide those processing recommendations later this summer. Here is just a simple slide comparison that provides an overview regarding the property differences between the different products. Daniel, could you provide us a little bit more information on the towers and bale property differences?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got three different rows here in this particular table for either the tower 160 or the 365 tower, and then the bottom row would be representative of all 5 grinds that I just spoke about on one of the previous slides, except in the small bale format. And 160 in towers is what we recommend if you're using peat processing equipment in an inline mixer. It mixes the best in that system. We also get a good yield recovery. So you can see the bulk density is 2 to 2.2 pounds per cubic foot. And however, 365 in the tower format is what we would recommend if you're doing pad mixing. So like if you're using a skid steer or a front end loader to open the bale, kind of like what many nursery growers are doing. So really no inline mixing equipment, just skid steer or a bucket loader. You mix the component with peat or bark or something like that, and then you put it into a hopper that goes to a pot filler, or maybe even you know, the employees are hand filling the containers themselves. But that we still get really good yield when you're bucket mixing or opening with a bucket loader, but it is reduced yield. But that being said, we do recommend the coarser grade of fiber to be pad mix because it does mix much easier than the finer grade does. Now that being said, if you do want to use the coarse grade in an inline mixing system, you can, and the yield will be identical to the 160 there in the top row. That being said, the bottom row, HydraFiber and the 50-pound bales, you know, that does require a specialized piece of equipment, and the advantage there is you get very seamless mixing. You also get a much better yield, especially compared to the pad mixing option that we have there. And also all 5 grades are available through the small 50-pound bales.
Cool, thanks for that, Daniel. Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, what makes our product very different is just the bulk density. And as you can see here in this overview, we're providing you just a brief overview of what other raw materials tend to be from a bulk density standpoint. And you can see HydraFiber just is less. It weighs less, and as such, it allows itself to be used in a variety of different ways. And people ask all the time, well, what is HydraFiber a replacement for? And while most folks are using our product to replace perlite, as people have become more familiar with HydraFiber, they've started to use it to replace peat moss in some instances. In some instances, it's replacing bark. In other instances, it's replacing some core. It really depends on the grower or the blender and what they're trying to achieve with our product. And that's really driven by a lot of things, cost of raw materials, availability of raw materials, products they're trying to grow, products they're trying to develop. But the nice thing about our product, since it's engineered in a factory and it's always the same, it allows itself to be very transferable in a lot of different ways. That bulk density also translates itself back into some unique properties, which I'd like Daniel to talk about with regards to nitrogen and nitrogen drawdown.
Yeah, and because HydraFiber is made from trees, one of the #1 questions we get is, okay, well, you know, I've used sawdust in the past, or I've used some other wood-based product in the past, and you know, we've had fertility issues specifically with nitrogen. And the question is, you know, how does HydraFiber behave in the container with regards to nitrogen fixation? And so, you know, to Jennifer's point, you know, that lightweight bulk density, if we look at the right-hand side of the slide, we see that in an 80-20 peat HydraFiber mix, that where we make 20% of the volume of the substrate, when we look at that on a weight basis, we're actually only making up 4% of the total mass. So we do see that the low mass of the HydraFiber contributes to low mass in the substrate overall, which means that there's going to be a low impact on nitrogen tie-up. And when we look at the university data, we've done a number of trials with many of our university partners. This is a trial from 2015 that we did with North Carolina State University. And you can see clearly over a 21-day period that at 100% HydraFiber 065 that there's a drawdown of nitrogen. And to be honest, unless you're growing hydroponically, we really don't recommend that you grow at 100%. Not just because of the nitrogen issue, but also the physical properties are really quite different than a peat perlite mix. However, when we look at peat HydraFiber blends at either 10, 20, or 30% HydraFiber, we can see that we're increasing in available nitrogen, and that really the parts per million differences are really not that different from 100% peat. That being said, this is a tightly controlled lab test. And if we look at our experience over the past 5 years in the North American marketplace with growers all over North America, the growers are coming to us and saying that, they're able to grow at the same feed rates without changing their fertilizer regime. So that's good news. And so the bottom line is growers just aren't seeing an issue in their mixes with regards to fertility.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think it's really crucial that folks aren't seeing much of a change because let's face it, when it comes to changing soil and media, it's not something that people are readily looking to do. So the fewer modifications they need to change in their strategy, the better. So we're going to shift gears here for just a little bit. The first slides have really been talking about HydraFiber Ultra, which is our flagship product. That product we've been actively selling in the marketplace for just under 10 years. We have it available in the 50-pound bales, which are the most compressed and yield the most per container. But we're now making it available in a tower formation for the folks that want to have access to that material, but maybe just don't have the room or the interest in adding a specialized piece of equipment. We've also added a product called Easy Blend. Now, we introduced 40-pound bales of this product last year at the Cultivate show in 2019. At this year's Cultivate show, we're adding these 95 cubic foot towers. So again, similar to the other towers, the nice thing about this product is you can break it apart with a front end loader, do some pad mixing or bucket blending. Again, we're working on inline mixing recommendations and hope to have those available for the growers and the blenders later this summer. This particular product appears similar to peat. The reason for that is because we've added a bit more bark to this product than the Ultra product. And that bark allows us to be able to break the bales and the towers apart much easier, hence the name Easy Blend. It's one of our easiest products to break apart and blend without a specialized piece of equipment. Now, it's not as highly compressed as the Ultra materials, so it doesn't save you as much money, but it gives you a nice wood fiber alternative for the folks that are looking for an engineered fiber. Again, very suitable for organic use. And this product has been in the marketplace now for a little over a year. The pH on this product is slightly different than Ultra. It's 4.4, and the moisture content on this is at 26%. And the reason for that is because it contains more bark, we need the moisture content to be slightly higher so that there are no re-wetting issues when you blend it with other raw materials. From a porosity standpoint, Daniel, would you just outline for the audience what makes this product different compared to the Ultra?
Yeah, and so this is, I would say it matches up more closely with HydraFiber 065 in terms of physical properties. When we were developing this, we were initially looking at something that had a little bit higher water holding capacity than some of the coarser grades. That way, because most of the target customers that are looking at this are customers that may be bucket blending. Typically, those are nursery growers. And in many of those types of mixes, they tend to be very heavy bark. And so we felt that having something with a little bit better water holding capacity could make a good, peat-like material for those mixes. And so that was the rationale for developing this fiber the way we did.
Cool. So just to summarize, all of the products are made in our factory in North Carolina. All are made using southern yellow pine. All are OMRI. The main differences are really related to the physical properties. So again, the Easy Blend tends to be more like our finest ultra fiber. And the compression rate. So HydraFiber Ultra bales, again, paired with the HydraFiber processing unit, yield you the most material from the truck as well as the best blend results. The Ultra towers and the Easy Blend towers give you good compression. You're able to get less on the truck, but still a nice amount on the truck. And these products lend themselves to being blended without a specialized piece of equipment. Some other things that we think are really neat about HydraFiber is just the fact that we're able to deliver the product when you need it. A lot of our customers have moved to just-in-time shipping or just almost-in-time shipping. Many of them just keep a truckload of inventory at a time at their factory, so there's no need to tie up a lot of production space, holding lots of inventory. We're making wood fiber in our factory 365 days a year. We have the ability to run 3 shifts if necessary, and we also have a warehouse facility that we can use to ship products from, which you're seeing here. So all of the HydraFiber product arrives palletized with a cap and then a shrink wrapping. The product is suitable to stand outside if necessary, but many of our customers, since they're just bringing it in as they need it, are choosing to just keep it inside near their soil processing areas, so it's readily available for them when they're ready to use it. The other thing that's really important with regards to our product is consistency. So there's a lot of different ways you can get consistency, but in our case, one of the things that's very important to us is to make sure that our refining plates are as sharp as possible when we make HydraFiber and HydraFiber products. And so as such, we're continuing to make sure that we're using new plates or newer plates. When we make the fiber, we actually recast our plates every 7 to 10 days. And this investment for our business cost us just over $250,000, which is a pretty significant investment. In our instances, we're lucky because we're part of a bigger group, the Profile Group, that processes a lot of wood. And since this is our core business, and it's also, we believe, core to helping us provide consistent, reliable product, we make this investment to make sure that there are no deviations in the product that we ship to our customers. And one of the last things we'd like to just talk about as a neat benefit is just this reduced carbon footprint. So our product is completely made from completely renewable materials. As I mentioned before, when the trees are harvested, they go to the lumber mill, they're debarked and planks are made from them. After they square up the planks, there's always leftover wood, and that leftover wood for the lumber mill is waste wood, but it's good wood for us because there's no chemicals or varnish in it. So we happily take that wood to use as our base material. Everything is made in North America. Everything's OMRI listed that we work on. The product is sterile and inert when it leaves our facility, and we do everything we can to reduce our footprint on the planet with our product that we ship out. So at this point in the conversation, honestly, I hope you're asking yourself the question, this sounds just really too good to be true, Jennifer. You're telling me you're going to, reduce the amount of trucks I have to order and offload and store. You're telling me that I'm buying a product that's actually good for the environment. You're telling me I'm going to get a product that's consistent and reliable so I don't have to continually changing my soil and media recipes. This sounds really terrific. How much of it can I use? Well, we actually commissioned a study with Dr. Glenn Fain a couple years ago from Auburn University to ask that very question, because many of our customers, once they got started at 20 to 30%, continued to ask us if they could go higher. And so we've continued to work to better understand just, exactly what is the ideal inclusion rate for HydraFiber. And I'm happy to say that the answer really kind of depends. We've been able to grow in HydraFiber at as low as 10 to 15%, all the way up to 100%. And so our opportunity as the wood experts was really to figure out, what our possibilities were with the product. And so we're able to advise our customers at any inclusion rate how to grow and make really nice plants. So in this particular example, we're showing in the left pot, at the top left corner, we're showing what I'm calling the old industry control, which is 80% peat, 20% perlite. Again, same photo, top left corner, you can see what I'm calling the new industry control, which is 70% peat, 30% HydraFiber. And I think you'll agree with me that both products look very similar. Both are very sellable, and there's really not that much difference. Which in this instance, when we're asking you to change something as significant as soil and media, not having much difference is actually, I think, a good thing, a positive thing. And that's what our customers tell us, is they haven't had to change hardly anything when they've made the transition to HydraFiber. If we go to the image on the far right corner, again, you see 80% peat, 20% perlite. And then the far right image is, again, the new industry control, which is 60% peat, 40% HydraFiber. You can, again, see very little difference, both very sellable and very suitable for the market. Lower left-hand corner is, again, the old industry control, 80% peat, 20% perlite. The new industry control, which is now 50% peat, 50% HydraFiber. And I'm happy to tell you, folks that are on the call, that we have many customers who are early adapters who started at 30% and grew their inclusion rate over the years now to 50% peat, 50% HydraFiber. We actually have several customers that have not only eliminated their perlite from their mixes, but have reduced their peat moss and are growing in a 50% peat, 50% HydraFiber mix and doing quite well. And then the last picture on the far right is the lower right, I would say, is now kind of a what if. It's 40% peat, 60% HydraFiber. And now you can see what happens when HydraFiber becomes the majority raw material in the mix. And I think you'll agree with me that both of these plants look very suitable and very saleable. And so, the message here is that HydraFiber really can be used at, lower inclusion rates as well as higher inclusion rates. And as Daniel outlined before, we feel very comfortable recommending HydraFiber for use at 50 and 60% inclusion. If you want to go higher than that, you probably have to grow more hydroponically, but certainly in the application of ornamental bedding plants, trees, shrubs, things like that, we have no hesitation at recommending HydraFiber at higher inclusion rates. So some folks really want to know what's the catch. Are there any issues with regards to making the transition to HydraFiber? And we want to provide you with some guidance, if you will, on what we've learned over the last few years as being kind of crucial or small modifications, if you will, when you make the transition. As we discussed earlier, HydraFiber just manages water differently. And so as such, we advise many of our customers to modify their irrigation strategies. And in most instances, we're asking customers to irrigate less. And there are many reasons for this, which I'm going to ask Daniel to highlight.
Sure, yeah. So when we, as Jennifer touched on, when we first came to the market in 2015, many of our customers, as well as independent university researchers, were saying, hey, there's something special going on with HydraFiber substrates with regards to water management. Some growers were reporting that they felt that their plants were able to go several hours in between irrigations, especially once the plants were at store quality. So anyways, we did some initial trials and investigations into this, and this is one of the tests that we did early on to evaluate this that had some very interesting results. We sent 3 different samples to Waypoint Analytical to measure available water. And the 3 different mixes all had the same peat source, all 80% peat, and then we varied the 20% fraction with either core, perlite, or HydraFiber. What we found is that when we compared the HydraFiber mix to the perlite mix, that we were able to increase the freely available water by 10%. And then the result that really was really surprising to us was that we were able to increase the freely available water compared to the core mix by almost 37%. And the reason why that's interesting is, as many people know, core holds a lot of water. That's one of the reasons why many growers have started using it. But the difference between total water holding capacity and available water is that available water just means what is easily accessible to the plant roots. And so even though core does hold a lot of water, it holds it tighter, and so the freely available water is not readily accessible to the plants as it is to HydraFiber. And if we move on to the next slide, we have just a very simple graphic on these three different raw materials: peat, core, and HydraFiber, just kind of highlighting how does water interact differently with each of these raw materials. In the case of peat, peat has a natural waxy cuticle, which makes the peat fibers repel water. It either takes a lot of water or a surfactant in order to overcome this waxy cuticle and to get the peat fibers to actually take on water. You contrast that with core, which I touched on in the previous slide, that it holds a lot of water. And when you actually look at those fibers under a microscope, they're like little tiny sponges with pits and cavities, and when you add water to it, you can actually see those fibers swell as they absorb the water into the fiber. And we think that's really the key difference to HydraFiber, because when we look at HydraFiber under a microscope, we see that the water will travel along the surface of the fiber and also be held in the pore spaces in between the fibers themselves. So we're not actually getting a lot of water absorbed into the fiber, it's mostly held on the surface. And so that's why we think that we're getting more freely available water with HydraFiber compared to core, is that the plants are pulling water off the surface of the fibers and from the pore spaces, whereas the core fibers is having to work hard to pull it out of the internal structure of the core. So let's move on to the next slide. So this is another key difference that we try to explain to a lot of our customers when they begin working with HydraFiber mixes, especially their section growers. And many of their growers will report that during the first crop turn, after they adopt to a HydraFiber mix, that their growers really try to focus on, what are the key differences in the greenhouse. And this is the number one thing that the growers report back to us, is that they see a crust forming on the upper centimeter, typically, of the container. And on this slide, we have two images on the left-hand side. The top one is of some dahlias. Imagine if you were a grower looking down a bay, you may say to yourself in a conventional mix, oh, well, these pots need to be watered, I better get the hose out. However, when we remove the pot and we look at the root zone, we can see that below that crust, or that upper centimeter, that there's actually still sufficient water. And so maybe you come back later in the day or the day after and water those plants again. And then on the pot on the right is kind of a more extreme example of what we see in the field, really just to illustrate the point that, yes, there is clearly surface drying. And what this boils down to is the water conductivity in the pot. And even though this is kind of a learning curve for most growers, there are some actual benefits that many of our growers have seen when they adapt to this. And that's they feel that they are actually able to control algae better, as well as fungus gnats and shore flies, because the surface of the pot is not staying wet, and so it's not making a favorable environment for algae and fungus gnats or shore flies. But that being said, it's still something that you need to keep be aware of, because, as Jennifer mentioned, if you don't recognize this, you could water sooner than what the plant actually requires. So let's go on to the next slide. So just kind of some summaries on some other topics as it relates to water. We already talked about traditional practices may need to be adjusting, so we highly recommend that growers learn the feel of the pot, meaning like they go and pick up pots. Because HydraFiber is lighter in weight, it's going to feel differently in the pot, so it's also important to pull the pot off and look at the root zone until the grower gets comfortable. With any substrate, oxygen in the root zone is extremely important to root development. Thankfully, mixes with HydraFiber are more forgiving than many other mix types, just because we add a lot of oxygen. Typically, growers see a 3 to 5% increase in the airspace of their growing mixes when they switch to HydraFiber compared to their old mix. However, it's still important that you make sure that you're watering correctly and not overwatering. so that we don't inhibit root development. It's important that when you go to blend the mixes that you hit a target moisture content of 60 to 65%. We have seen some growers that when they, after they install their HPU into their mixing line, they may move a water bar, or maybe they reduce the amount of water just because the mix feels different than their old peat perlite mix. And what they run into is the mixes are made too dry. They may not use a surfactant, and then they run into wettability issues in production. And so it's definitely important that you have it at the right moisture content. And we can certainly help you teach some field tests, some ways to very easily determine that you have the right moisture content. And lastly, the thing I want to touch on is if you're using a bark-based mix or a peat-based mix, we highly recommend using a surfactant. So HydraFiber takes on water pretty easily. You know, Jennifer touched on that our moisture content is 20%, which is definitely on the dry side, but at 20% moisture, it actually wets up fairly easily. However, when we combine it with peat or bark, which can be hydrophobic, and we have 70–80% of either of those raw materials and 20 to 30% HydraFiber, you know, the bark or the peat tends to be the liability in terms of how well that mix is going to wet up. So it's still important in those instances, and we highly recommend that you use a surfactant. If you're using a core HydraFiber mix in that particular instance, you really don't need a surfactant at all. Okay, let's move on. So now we just want to touch on pH management. We did a trial in 2017 with the University of New Hampshire and Dr. Ryan Dixon. It was a really great study. We touched on previously that HydraFiber has a pH of 4.5, so it's slightly acidic, fairly similar to peat moss. But what we learned in this research is that HydraFiber, even though it has an acidic pH, is really poorly buffered. And this is due to two factors. Number one, it has low bulk density, very lightweight in nature. And then two, it has low cation exchange capacity. And so these two factors really mean that the HydraFiber behaves almost exactly like perlite does in the substrate. But what we did find, and what this slide reflects, is that for every 10% peat moss, which is highly buffered, that we remove and replace with HydraFiber, which is poorly buffered, we should look to reduce our lime rate by 10%. So the reason why you want to do that is because if you don't make any lime change, you could overshoot your target pH, and you may have to do some pH correction. Now, we always recommend that you attempt lime rate changes in a very methodical way. In other words, before you make major changes, you know, one of the HydraFiber technical reps, we'd be more than happy to double check the calculations that you make on your lime rate, or we can make a suggestion as to how much lime you should use in your mixes. But that being said, even after you make a change, we still highly recommend running a batch in a small scale, doing some, you know, quick grow outs in your greenhouse before rolling it out to your entire operation. But again, just to reiterate, the most important thing that we've learned with regards to managing pH is that as you remove and replace your peat moss, for every 10%, you should reduce your lime rate by 10%. Okay, let's go on to the next tip.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so now we're going to segue into how to get proper fill. You know, this is probably the third and last tip we have for people making the transition. And as you can see here in the picture, the soil blends that contain HydraFiber just look different. They feel different. They're more spongy in nature. They flow out of the hoppers differently. And so, you know, often when you make the transition to a HydraFiber blend, you have to make some small changes and modifications to your filling equipment. And again, our technical team is very skilled and can help with this. But Daniel, why don't you provide us with some tips on what people need to do when they're making the switch to a HydraFiber substrate as it relates to pot fill?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've learned is that with HydraFiber, the main thing that you want to avoid is these large voids and air pockets that are in the container, because when you go to water them in, those voids will collapse and then you'll see shrinkage. And so what it takes is the right balance of compression going into the container. Thankfully, in general, 4-inch pots and larger are pretty easy to fill with very little tweaking and adjustment. However, plug trays, cutting trays, cell packs like a 1006 can be more of a challenge to fill. This is a 1006 pack on a KBXL machine, and if you were to imagine that the mix has already fallen on top of the tray and it's about to pass under this plow, the first thing that we would recommend that the grower do is raise up the plow so that it's about 2 to 3 fingers or 2 inches above the top of the tray. That helps prevent the mix from being raked out of the cells because those long fibers are very clingy, and if we have the plow set too low, it can actually rake the mix out of the container. After that, typically the flat will go under a compactor wheel, which either has blades or is a roller. And in that, what we recommend there is that the blades or the roller is set right at the height of the top of the container so that we get the right amount of mix compressed into the cell. And it's always important, again, to kind of test run a few pots or cell packs through this. Test the compression because, again, if you have it too tight, you're removing a lot of the airspace. The mixes are going to be wetter. And so it's definitely a balancing act. So it may require a little bit of playing with until you get it, get comfortable with where you want it to be. Let's go on to the next slide. I believe it's talking about the soil conditioner. Yeah. So this is something that we developed with agronomics. Now, we don't, there's some customers who opt not to go with this piece of equipment. It mounts on any hopper on top pot filler like this KBXL. It also works with non-agronomics machines. But that being said, what it does is it helps control the flow. So that's the second key thing in addition to compaction that's important, is you want to maintain a very water-like flow coming out of the hopper. So you want very small pieces falling out of the hopper. Again, this can be managed without this piece of equipment. In those instances, you just want to make sure you have the gate on the hopper set to the right height, and then you want the belt moving at a speed to where you maintain that nice water-like flow. So just to kind of reiterate some of the things that we've learned, okay, it's all about the flow as well as the compaction through the pot filling equipment. So as long as you have those two parameters adjusted correctly, then you can get proper fill. The correct moisture is important. If you have the mix that's too wet, so I mentioned earlier 60 to 65% in general is what we recommend for your moisture content of your mixes. If you're above 65%, the mix can clump together and you can have issues with filling. The propellers, many of you have propellers on your machines, or maybe you've taken them off. Those things we found actually work really well. So if you've taken them off, it may be of benefit to put them back on and try them out, because we have found that they actually make a positive impact on getting good container fill. And then the last tip that we'll talk about is if you're using an automatic transplanter, because the mixes do tend to be a little bit more spongy, what we've found is adjusting the planting depth on the transplanter by a little bit makes a good impact in making sure that that plug gets seated properly into the pot.
Cool. Doesn't get much simpler than that. So really the transition to HydraFiber is pretty simple. And the good thing for those of you watching this video is you're no longer first. You know, there were a lot of other growers that and blenders that went on ahead of you. And I'm happy to say that the use of HydraFiber is quite widespread. And so because of their learnings, we're able to pass their learnings on to you to make the transition to HydraFiber as easy as possible. So, you know, everybody asks, well, what products like to grow in HydraFiber? And I'm just going to flash through a few images, but honestly, we've not found a product that doesn't like growing in HydraFiber. You know, littler pots, big pots, mixing with bark, mixing with core, mixing with peat. It really depends on the customer and what they're looking for, and quite frankly, what their pain point is as it relates to soil and media. That dictates how much HydraFiber they use, what they blend it with, what they grow it in. What we are excited to see is that many of our customers, especially our early adapting customers, in addition to raising their inclusion rates from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50%, many of them are also looking for additional crops and additional uses that they can use HydraFiber in. And so especially recently, we've seen a lot of growers starting to make their own liner mix and using it in liner trays for propagation. which is very exciting. Again, shrubs and trees, all no issue. Hanging baskets, mixed containers, things like that, perennials. We have fibers that work for short-term crops as well as long-term crops. Many customers choose to just use one fiber to keep their lives simple. Our 160 fiber, which is kind of middle of the road, is by far and away our most popular fiber, but again, our technical specialists can help advise you on which ones to use and which ones might be the best for your operation. Again, you know, lots of different varieties have been grown and are being grown in HydraFiber every day. And the exciting thing also is we're starting to see edible growers that are looking for a more sterile and inert material, something suitable for armory lifting, now adding HydraFiber to their assortment, which is really cool. So as Daniel and I mentioned, we have a couple of different product options. We have the Ultra as well as the Easy Blend. The Easy Blend towers and the Ultra towers, again, do not require a specialized piece of equipment, but the HydraFiber that's in the 50-pound bales, the Ultra, the product that we've been working with for 5+ years in the market, does benefit from a specialized piece of equipment. And the reason for that is because the bales are so tightly compressed, you need a specialized piece of equipment in order to break those bales apart and mix them effectively. We have found over the years that once you pull the product apart, you have to mix it almost simultaneously with a base material, whether that's peat or bark or core. That's really up to the customer. But you need that base material to keep the product separated and to finish blending. So what I'm showing here is a picture of the HydraFiber processing unit. This equipment is built by Agronomics, a leader in greenhouse automation, and that team of technicians, the Agronomics team, when you finish your soil trials with HydraFiber, you work directly with Agronomics to figure out what is the best way to incorporate a piece of HydraFiber processing equipment or the HydraFiber Expander, which is our smaller capacity machine, into your operation. And they work with all kinds of different pieces of equipment, and so they really try to make this plug and play so that it's so it's the least amount of disruption to your processing barns as possible. But in a nutshell, how this product works is you start by putting the HydraFiber bales on the top conveyor. On the lower conveyor is where the raw material resides and rides. And those two materials are met at the top of the HydraFiber processing unit, where the HydraFiber bale is teased apart with a set of rollers, and furthermore, it's then combined lower in the HydraFiber processing unit with the secondary material, the base material, if you will. And those products are blended simultaneously so that when it drops out of the bottom of the HydraFiber processing unit, it is essentially a completely mixed blend. Now, a lot of our customers choose to create kind of a base blend, if you will, and then blend further other components. The HydraFiber processing unit, while it's fairly standard, it ends up being a custom unit by customer because we always try to work with what the customer has on site and try to use that to help us configure and create a processing area that gives that customer the best blend results. So this is just one example of how an installation could be done, but there are many, many different ways of doing installations. We started with the HydraFiber processing unit, which you saw just a moment ago, but there's been a tremendous amount of demand from growers that just don't need as much capacity, and so we created the HydraFiber Expander a couple of years ago, and this easy to install machine is best for growers that have one or two planting lines. It can be combined with a peat bale shaver or with a hopper. We have customers again that are using peat moss, that are using bark or using core, and this machine has been designed to work with all of them. It's just a smaller footprint and a smaller cubic yards per hour capacity machine. Now, the HydraFiber processing unit, this is the unit that we started with over 5 years ago. There are many, many of these units in the marketplace, and this one is best for people that need a little bit more capacity. And for folks that have a very high capacity need, such as professional soil blenders and very large grower operations, we have the HydraFiber Extra Wide available, and we can make the capacity on this machine at request for the customers that need this machine. Again, all these machines are built by Agronomics, installed by Agronomics, and serviced by Agronomics on behalf of the HydraFiber team. So with that said, we've kind of come to the end of our A to Z presentation. I really hope that we've been able to provide you some insight and some overview on what makes HydraFiber different and unique. You know, we're very excited about this product, and as you can see, a lot of the marketplace is excited about this product too. Many of the growers that we have as customers, which I'm featuring here on this slide, have chosen for HydraFiber as part of their soil and media program, and we're quite happy about that and proud about that. And any of these folks, I'm sure if you reached out to them, if you have questions about HydraFiber, would be happy to provide you with their experience and share their stories on why they've chosen HydraFiber for their organization. So we really do think that HydraFiber is changing the game as it relates to soil and media materials. We're delivering our product when you want it. Really, there's no need to stockpile raw materials anymore as it relates to HydraFiber. Because we're making our product in the factory, it's consistent and it's always arriving in the same pH and same moisture level. So again, fidgeting on the processing line because the chemical properties of the product are different goes away. And we're making product in our factory all the time, so there's no need to tie up capital because you're having to place an order ahead of time. We can send and ship to you as needed. With that, I just want to say thank you very much for taking time to review our presentation. We've got a full staff that would love to answer any questions that you might have, featuring here on these slides. If you have any questions at all after this presentation, I would encourage you to send them to hydrofiber@profileproductswithans.com or reach out to Daniel Norden or myself or anyone else on the HydraFiber team, and we'd be happy to help you and answer any questions you might have. And again, we appreciate you very much taking time for the presentation today and wish you a pleasant day. Take care. Bye.